This is Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell on the Forge Audio Network.
Welcome to this episode of Forge Daily. I am your host, Mackenzie Barwell, coming to you on May 20th, 2024. It's a Monday of the long weekend. I hope you are all enjoying it. This past Saturday, Forge FC matched up against Vancouver. And since it's the first episode of the week, I am joined by Steve Milton to debrief it. Forge FC conceding their first loss of the 2024 season, 2-1 against a very strong Vancouver team. That being said, the score not necessarily reflecting just how close this game was. Coach Bobby talked about that in the post-game press conference and said that this team played with enough quality and created enough opportunities to come away with at least a point. But he also didn't hesitate in saying that deserving and actually getting are two very distinct things. So we'll get to Milty and I's conversation very shortly, but first I want to talk about some other results that unfolded across the league. Forge, having lost to Vancouver, will bump them down to fourth place now. Vancouver in third with 3 wins, 2 losses, and a draw. Athletico Ottawa and Pacific sitting above them. However, they're not tied anymore. They matched up Friday. Ottawa coming away with a 1-0 win, which means they're currently sitting in first with a total of 14 points relative to Forge FC's 10. Mind you, they still have one more game played. Interestingly, though, York and Cavalry, a highly contested matchup on Saturday, either side coming away with a point after tying 2-2. York not far behind Forge in the standings. They're in 5th, but even further down the ladder is Cavalry FC. They've only collected 7 points of 6 games played thus far. So with that context, keep it in mind, and let's get right into breaking down this weekend's matchup between Forge FC and Vancouver. Milty, and then there were 2 on the long weekend, you and I on a Monday.
This is it. Yeah, it's kind of lonely in here, isn't it?
I know. Thank God we have each other.
And
of course, we're not even sitting in the same room. We've got a wall dividing us right now.
That's perfect.
Okay, so let's go over. We've got some exciting soccer to talk about. The Vancouver Forge matchup. Coach Bobby not disappointed necessarily in the performance from Forge. He said, we could have easily come away with a point, but the soccer gods maybe not so much in their favor. What did you make out of this one?
Well, I think just, you can't have a bad start. Even against a team that you're probably better than them, and I think you're better than, if you're Forge, you're better than most teams in this league, and you just can't allow that kind of thing to happen in the first, was it 18 minutes?
Yeah, well, the first goal was 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
And then the second one was not long after, and something not unfamiliar to Forge, but this time going the other way.
A couple of the guys had played with Vasco at in the Vancouver Whitecaps chain. They had known him, and then he gets in there and does an Olympico off that. And the commentators at the time, I don't know if you saw it, but they mentioned that they thought it was the goalkeeper's fault, and maybe he should have been against the far post. But when I talked to Bobby about it, he says, well, yeah, then the guy just steps, then one of their guys comes up from the inside and heads it in front of him. So it was a perfectly placed
That
ball.
is a really good point, Milty. I listened to that on the broadcast as well, and they said that maybe Chris misjudged the height of it.
I think maybe once he decided to play it that way and knew that somebody wasn't coming in, perhaps he did. He got up a little early.
Yeah.
And unless he's like a seagull, he's not going to be able to hang that long enough to get it. And I think the commentator was, I think it was Jimmy Brennan probably at the time, and he made the point he probably should have been on the far post. But again, that leaves an awful lot of webbing for somebody to come in that your defenders aren't expecting to come up behind them and aren't watching them.
Yeah, there's really not much you can do in that situation.
No.
I was going to say 3 goals of all of the Olympico's, which I don't think is that many. It's definitely under 10, have happened at Tim Hortons Field.
Well, it's quite amazing, and it's becoming the home for it. And my guess is, given who can put the bend on the ball on this team, it won't be the last one that we see in our lifetimes, or maybe even in the next couple of years. They're so exciting. They really, there is nothing, I think, that, and that's why you try for the corner kicks. And it's why when when you're clearing, you try not to make it a corner if you can have. You'd rather have at least a throw, so you take an extra player out of the mix.
Mm-hmm.
It's have one fewer that could potentially come up towards the box, and they're not probably going to do it from there. So yeah, I mean they're a glorious thing to see.
Everyone was just so shocked because it was kind of out of nowhere, and maybe that's because the last one we saw was in such a high pressure situation.
What was the press box like on that, Mac? I was at the time. I only saw it on replay because at the time I was feeding the black flies at my cottage.
Yeah, I forgot. Well, Milty went in, and Nico turns to me and he goes, "Did we just get Olympico'd?" And everyone is looking around like it wasn't a matter of everybody erupting. It was more so just like the confusion because of course like the fans here weren't cheering. It was just silent, and then we saw it ricochet off the post into the net, and everybody's just looking around thinking, did that actually just happen?
Well, the boom mics picked up when I was watching the highlights, the boom mics picked up. It was so quiet that the boom mics picked up the Vancouver players.
So you could hear them talking.
Well, yelling and like really like celebrating. They were in a bit of a delayed shock at first, but whoever was running up close, and I can't remember who the player was that was deep in the box. One might have scored the header had it been shorter. Right. You could really hear them. It almost sounded like the pandemic in 2020 when there were no fans and you could hear everything, and you could really hear I mean, fortunately there was no expletives deleted on that one, but I thought the first goal though, I don't know what, it felt like they weren't quite ready for that kind of thing. And this is what teams will try to do to good teams like Forge. They will try to drop balls into the box and hope for what Bobby calls the second play. And the second play is what happened there. I mean, you make the initial stop, but everybody now is out of position because you don't know where the rebound or anything like that's going to go, or even if it's a pass or a deflection or something like that. It's the second wave that comes in. That's exactly what happened. Bobby's talked about that.
Yeah, you heard that in the press conference. This first goal was not even 3 minutes in. Initially off a free kick. Chris makes the save, a really good one at that. And then that's kind of when it gets a bit chaotic because unfortunately the ball goes into danger. But Bobby made a good point too when he was asked in the press conference whether or not he felt, Forge came out flat-footed and was it a slow start? And he said, no, I wouldn't really generalize and say that. I think that this was an uncharacteristic moment. And I think to his point, we didn't necessarily see Forge slow the first half. I wouldn't say that they were slow. I think that was just a lapse in judgment and a very consequential one.
Oh, for sure. And yeah, I'm not necessarily criticizing the way they came out. What I am criticizing is that after you've got to be just a little bit better on when it's a set piece, because that's really, they don't give up much off the play. They really don't. They don't give a whole. Although I shouldn't say that because there was 2 or 3 of them that there had to be some pretty good saves by Colongo, diving and anticipatory saves. They got lucky on a couple. And then Alex cleared one in the second half that could have put the game away earlier. I want to say 78th minute or something like that. And it was confusion all over the place. But Bobby's right. He talks about this all the time. And in possession games, it's like basketball. You're not going to totally dominate. There are going to be a few tough minutes. It's how do you handle those 2 tough minutes? And that's just a bit of an alertness that many, many times won't cost you in this league. But, Vancouver, they have better players than they used to have. I'm not sure they're much of a team yet. I mean, they're clearly not. Well, I wouldn't say clearly. They've won a game, and that's the first game they've won here, right? And is it the first goal they've scored here? I think it is. Yes,
you're right. Not the first goal against Forge, but first goal. I think.
No, but the first one here, yeah.
I think the word you use there, alertness, is key, and I think that goes exactly with what Coach Bobby was saying in terms of maybe not necessarily pace of play, but 3 minutes in, you need to be a little bit more alert than that. And Amadou Kone first professional start in the number 9 position, and we saw some other changes to the starting lineup, but that was one of the things he said.
Tell me again what he said, because I wasn't there. So tell me how this is Kone talking, right?
He was asked what he learned from his first start in comparison to other games when he's come on as a sub, and he said it's the pace of play. I wasn't ready for it to be as fast as it was.
When he came on as a sub, or
when
as
he
a start?
Started yesterday, or
right, of course, and of course with the visiting team trying to make an impression.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Right, so there is that. But now that said, I thought he had. I mean, he could have in the second half there. He had. That scramble that was in and around the net. I think Bekker had a shot at it. Kone, I think, had something to do with it, with pressing in there and got a shot. The goalkeeper had to make a pretty good save. I mean, that's pretty good goaltender that they have there. He's proven himself in this league and at other levels of play as well. So I think that's a really good point. I don't know that I ever would have. I've never really played this game at any level, so I don't know that I would have recognized that. But you would. Yeah, everybody's rested coming in. Everybody's motivated. They've just heard their whatever the pregame speech is on both teams, and they're ready to rip the door off when they come out. They got to come out. They hold whoever's hand it is. They're Vancouver's excited because it's on the road. They're playing against the top teams. Forge always has a target on their back, that kind of thing. So yeah, the pace would be a little bit higher, and he's not coming in against tired legs, because you can only make X number of substitutions, 5 players. So some of them, that means 6 of them anyways, are not on fresh legs, and that's if they've already made all their 5 substitutions. It's a good point. Substitution, until I started looking at this game really closely, it's a bit like basketball. Again, same kind of thing. There's a lot of similarities between these teams, and substitutions are a big thing. How do you do when your A unit's not in there? Because very rarely can the A unit play the whole time, and you always expect something on substitution. So you try to do the matchups, and we saw that happen in the Montreal game. Bobby has been usually, people say he's predictable, but I think he knows on those substitutions, and I don't think it's much of and I don't think that's a negative thing. I mean, consistent would be part of it. He'll make some substitutions that you might say, oh, I didn't know he was going to do that, but he's got this. He knows his team. And, obviously 70 is the number, I think, all the time. That's, somewhere in there around 65, 70. That's when he's got everything. He's got the timing. He looks at the other team, tries to see who's weak, try to see who's run the most miles and where they're at and who's going to play them immediately, and makes that substitution then. So I get it now that you fully explained what Kone said, and you got to be happy for him. I mean, boy. And they're building up some of their youth minutes too. Probably, is he still qualified for minutes?
Yes.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, of course he does. Guy. Yeah. He's a young guy, so they picked up quite a few minutes there, and not that that's a concern. Bobby never thinks about that till later.
No, that's true.
But he's already had a chance to bring in some players, and given the fact that they're sort of up front situation's a little bit dicey right now.
I was just going to say, this is
okay. Well,
let
keep
me
saying
take it away.
Let's go.
Let me steal it from you here, Milty. Like, I was not.
No, don't steal it.
Fine.
It's yours.
Okay, I'm taking it.
It's yours. You got it.
Well,
all right, own this.
Obviously, we know that Taron Campbell was out for a bit. He's injured, and then to see Jordan Hamilton a little bit last minute, perhaps also step out with a bit of a knock. As we've talked about before, these aren't players that Bobby will want to overuse, if you will, especially this early on in the season. So number one, for Amadou to come in and step up the way that he did, no hesitation. He knows he has to start the match, so he went out and did it. And he was asked a bunch of times, including by myself at halftime, how it feels to start this game and what he's going to take away from it. And one of the first things he said was like, yeah, no, it's great, but I'm really just concerned about what's going on with the team right now. We're down 2-0. This was when they were going into halftime, and you got to respect the mentality that he had going into that game and throughout it, because he never once really, even when we tried to make it about him, as a young guy making his first start, he kind of deflected that in a good way on behalf of his team. And then, Milty, these 2 guys we're still waiting on.
I don't even know what to say, and I know the organization. They're trying to. They don't want to make excuses, right? Because you can't. You have to be who you are when you are that, right? And who they are right now is a team without Nana and without the one that really gets me is Cisse. Like he's already had a couple of visa
Mm-hmm.
approvals and still hasn't been able to get through. I don't
Yeah.
understand it. I really don't understand it, and I think that's starting to be frustrating because they really wanted both those guys for the Mexico
Yeah.
game,
Months ago.
the Mexico series. They were signed for that kind of thing, these kinds of games, and they're now playing
Mm-hmm.
another one uh, on Wednesday night. Those were the games. We're talking about games where you sort of Champions League on the line, or in Champions Cup, I should
Mm-hmm.
say, not League Cup, and they've missed the two already because of it. I mean, what's going on here? It's not like these guys like. There's everything recommends them coming here, and one of them has been here already. He's proven, to be, to have been here, and I say they have had the
He's done
approval.
the
They just
process.
can't seem to get that final. Yeah, we're working on that right now. On stories on. We just haven't been able to nail it down. I haven't been able to quite get a hold of the immigration people, and you have to give them. I mean, they're not going to talk about specific cases, but I need to hear about it in general, and so does all the fans here. I mean, you got two roster spots you're not using.
Yeah.
I mean, and for these kinds of games, should they? And I got every belief in the world that they can possibly win this week, and they could.
They
Um, but
yeah.
if they don't, I mean, that's their. I mean, they still have a chance to make Champions Cup by winning the league or winning the league playoff. But this is the shortest route, and this again specifically, these guys were signed for this kind of thing, as Mo Babuli was when he was here.
Yeah. It is really unfortunate though that this Canadian Championship is so well in terms of what Forge is going through for timing wise, that the Canadian Championship is this early on in the season.
A lot of people have complained about that, not just Forge. A lot of people have complained that this is, and I think they've been promised it's not going to be that way in the future. I mean, there needs to be some analysis of this kind of thing. It's hard, and it's really hard on the lower level teams that play senior soccer because sometimes they're not even going yet. They haven't even played a game yet. And the first ones are in the Canadian Championship. That's
Yeah.
a little difficult.
I mean, Forge is lucky, I think, having that CONCACAF experience, right? Obviously, they had a few regular season games, but having played Chivas twice, I think made all the difference coming into this tournament. So they'll play Montreal very shortly. So we've got another midweek game coming up. They lose 2-1 to Vancouver. Kyle Bekker comes in swinging, and I believe it was only 5 or 6 minutes into the second half. And I just want to talk about him really quickly because I think the broadcasters made a good point in saying that we would normally see a little bit more of him in terms of statistics at this point in the season. We haven't yet, but he always seems to make an appearance in a timely manner.
He does make an appearance in a time like his entire career, and I think even before he got here, but definitely here. He's been that's why he's the face of not only this team but of this league, and he's had some shots at it. He's had a few field goals, right, where he's
He
gone over the
has.
bar, and
He keeps striking, which we want him to do, of course.
exactly, yeah, and that one wasn't going over the bar, was it? That was a worm burner, but
Yeah.
again, you haven't had to worry about Kyle Bekker that way. Not that anybody's ever worried, because if you watch the game and the play goes through him, and a lot, much of the time, as it does go through Ali as well, in different manners that it goes through each of them, the types of play that they go through. But part of it is because the flanks have played so well, and we saw it again. I mean, he was more in the middle this time, but
It's sounding like a broken record at this point, Milty. It's
I mean,
always
Borges right now if the season ended right now, he's the most outstanding player. Like in my mind, he's just been. I'm not saying he's the best player in the league. He's most outstanding though. He's pretty well right up there as the best too. That pass back to Bekker was seeing eye, and the more he passes, the more he's going to score. And the
Mm-hmm.
more he scores, the more he's going to be able to pass. It's a symbiotic relationship within
Mm-hmm.
himself, and get back and forth, back and forth. Now you cheat towards him, and that happened. Draw a guy, boom, hits Bekker on the in fly, just charging through.
Well, another assist for Borges, and I just wanted to double check what he's at right now. Do you know?
I want to
Is
say
it
4, but like which is pretty tremendous because this league doesn't. Those are true assists. I mean, soccer does not give up assists easily, and he's just in on every game. He's in on almost all the goals, one way or the
Yep.
other, and
Yep.
and Chouinier's right there, and Borges had a drilling. I think he himself and Chouinier had one. A couple. They had some shots. They had some chances at it, and of course, there's Jensen again, almost with a 90th minute
Oh,
chance at it. Yeah, I
I
think
was standing, Milty, right behind the net with the photographer at that point, and Noah wanted that so bad. I literally heard him scream, "Here!" Like he was like waiting. Like I watched the replay, and it actually the whole sequence moved quite fast. But when I was watching it in person, it felt like slow motion because Noah was standing there for what felt like at least 10 seconds, like waiting for the opportunity, and just wide, just wide.
I mean, and I think that's what Bobby and when you would have been talking to him right after the game,
Mhm.
there's a sort of a recency element to that's what those are the chances he's I mean, right at the end there they had some chances, and Benny had one. Benny had one he just drilled, and you're thinking they created those chances, so of course you think you should have, and I think they should have on total, but definitely given the way it kind of finished there, they probably should have had a point and out of it and a home point, and I think they would have been satisfied with that.
Speaking of Coach Bobby, you spoke to him this morning, and I want to make sure that this gets in the episode before we transition over to our next one, because it is very applicable to the next match against CF Montreal, and something I think worth pointing out because I watch practice every day, but I still don't know what these cones mean. So please.
Well, I didn't realize either is that, and they'll do this with every team, and they'll take tendencies on teams, and they'll put a white cone where how they like to possess the ball. And we know that Montreal wants to play a possession game. They don't need much in this game, right? I mean, Forge has to score first of all an away goal, or they're not. And so the way to prevent an away goal, of course, is keep the ball themselves. So. And they have a kind of a system that they use where they try to find pockets. And I think Bobby was saying to me that it's absolutely brilliant when it works. So what you do is you put these white cones pretending that they're in the positions, and I wouldn't reveal that because that would be giving away one of the strategies. And I don't even know what I'm looking at half the time. But that's the idea, is that they use white cones to be those other players, and then you react to that and saying, here's where those pockets are that they're trying to hit. And Bob said that it's truly brilliant. Bobby said that it's truly brilliant when it works. Now, of course, I might finish that sentence for him by saying that maybe it isn't when it doesn't, right? And that's the thing with Montreal right now is that a lot of things aren't working.
Yeah, Forge is an interesting spot, and I asked Coach Bobby whether or not it would make a difference with this away goals rule, and he said the goal is always to score, but now it's quite literally mandatory in order for them to move on. So I believe if they tie, it's got to be at least 2 goals, right?
Yeah, if it was 2-2, then they would move on based on away goals, and if they win, of course. Even if it's 1-0, because they'll have 1-1 and tied 1, they would move on there. But you're right; they must. It is mandatory to get a goal. So where does that leave you? Does it leave you changing your style? If I'm Montreal, I want to score early because now I'm forcing the visiting team to score twice.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, things can happen when you try to score twice, because what can happen then is you have to press generally. And then you end up down potentially 3, because a counterattack can kill you if they make the type of save. I talked to Ashinoto Janssen after today's practice, and he said the big thing is if they should happen to score first, meaning Montreal, don't treat it like the end of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
You still are only one goal away from being one goal away, like, right? So, and you can happen. And I getting that goal. I mean, remember, they had never scored against Montreal, right? And they'd played them, 3-4 times, and they had never scored a goal against Montreal. And I'm wondering how, if that's a psychological thing. They know they can do it, and they I think they've only had one game. The only game was the tie in Pacific last week, where they haven't scored, and that includes against the 2 games against the Mexican teams as well. So they're scoring goals, and
it's clear that they're offensively sound this year. What's the word I'm looking for? Clinical.
Yeah, that's right. I think you're right. And they're getting the chances. And if they can just make a little more out of those chances, I think what you need to do is this. Montreal, what have they lost? And it's awful.
I believe one game, they've won one of the past 11 games.
11 games they've won. Yeah, and 3 draws in there and 7 losses. They've lost 4 straight now. I think what you have to do is take the crowd out of it. It's a very tough place to play. Hamilton's lost their 3-0 and 5-0, and I think it was 2 years ago in 2022 when they lost 3-0. Bobby said it was the worst, and so did all the players that had been anytime. It's the worst first half of football in the history of that franchise.
Wow.
Yeah, and they can't do that again. They can't even have the worst starting 5 minutes ever. They've got to be front foot and pressing and playing their game. And if you can do that, think of what that crowd's going to do. They know. Look, this is Montreal's chance. This is this is really their only chance of making Champions Cup, because they're out of it on the league. I mean, already they're out of it, right? Given their injuries, so what you need to do is put that in everybody's heads, not just on players in the field, but on the reason why they've been so tough at home against Hamilton, and other teams, because it's a tough place to play. That Saputo Stadium it's a great spot. I love that place, and it's intimate. It's cut into the side of the hill outside. You got the great view of the mountain, and you got the great view of the dome. Everything there, it makes it good when it's good. But when you're shaky, I've always said the ball is round and it bounces, so you don't know what it's going to do and when it's not going to do that. And this is essentially, other than the fact they have to score, they do have to score a goal. But if they can get that goal at any point in there and it's not out of control, then you don't know what's going to happen. I mean,
you really don't.
You put pressure on the other team. They get a little nervous and they say, "Geez, if we lose this one, what do we got left in the season? We got to go all the way to, late October." So
right, and be switched on by that point. Not that either side wouldn't have been already, but it would mean way more. The ball is round and it bounces. That's That might have to be the title of the episode today.
Well, it could be. Yeah, it could be. I mean, we have used it before, though, so maybe we should,
But you're right. I feel like it's going to be one of those games where the team to come out and potentially score first, but I'm more so referring to like the energy level and the pace and the aggressiveness right off the hop, I think could come away with the win. I feel
put it in their heads. Put it in their heads. And it's most important to put it in the heads of the players on the field. I mean, I talked a lot about the crowd earlier, but in the long run, you don't hear the crowd if you're on the field after a while, the first few minutes. Right. So you hear them if they're with you. If you can get them to say to themselves, Mac, damn, these guys are as good on the road right now as they were at home. And that's where we are. Like, wait a minute. That wasn't a fluke back there. That wasn't just because they had the wind at their backs or whatever, And even playing against the 4 players that they weren't going to start, they were going to start on the previous Saturday or the next Saturday and the previous Saturday, they did well once they got their legs under them. That group was playing against, they shouldn't have been tired. They had to break, but it was a whole different trip, right? So once they got through that first 15 minutes against Montreal last time, in first 15 minutes in the second half, they played them straight up, and you could argue at the end they could have, should have won. They can do it.
So many, based on the research that I've done, I know I've not been here every single time, but they're just so close, and that's what Dom said to me after practice this morning too. So I really hope, Milty, well, actually, let me be a little bit more neutral. I'm a neutral media.
Well, no, you can be. I'll take care of that part in us for now if you want. So you go ahead. So
look forward to debriefing potentially a different result in favor of maybe an underdog side in terms of the MLS fan perspective. So
it is an upset. If they win, it's an upset. Let's not.
Yes.
Okay,
Let's
it's
not
an
get that
upset.
twisted. Absolutely.
Deserved upset.
Yeah.
And it's not out of the question.
2 more days, I think, and then we're back at it to debrief this one. Another match.
Yeah, we'll be talking. The game's Wednesday night, so we'll be talking either Wednesday night or Thursday morning, right?
Okay, I look forward to it.
Happy Victoria Day, or do you call it May 2? You're young enough to be May 2 for because you're still party age.
Yeah.
You're still party.
Is there a threshold for age who's allowed to say May 2 for?
I don't know. I was going to ask you.
I
know. I used to say it when I was a party boy, which was
totally
last week. Yeah.
Last night. Oh, it's May 2-4. That will be all for today's episode of Forge Daily. We've got another midweek matchup coming up on Wednesday, so that won't be the last time you see Milty this week. Tomorrow, I'm joined by Canada soccer commentator Mac Milty. He called the preliminary round matchup of the Canadian Championship between York and Forge, plus the MLS matchup this past weekend between Toronto FC and Montreal. So he'll have some good insight on either side. Thank you all so much for tuning in to today's episode. I encourage you to do the same tomorrow.
This has been Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell. If you like what you heard, please like, follow, subscribe, comment, and share.